Welcome back everyone, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down a question that a lot of you have been asking, and that is, should I mortgage my personal residence in order to fund my buy-to-let property portfolio? Well, great news, that's exactly what we're going to be breaking down. Now, the UK just has this weird obsession with owning property outright and being debt free. And my opinion is this is actually due to poor education. See, when we're brought up in the system, as it like, and we're all bred to be sheeps, right? And by the way, that's not actually a bad thing for a country. You can't have all leaders, you can't have all entrepreneurs, you can't have all bosses. If there weren't people that wanted to be employees, you couldn't have employers. In the same way, if you didn't have people to rent property, you wouldn't have buy-to-lets in the first place, because everyone wants to buy and own, right? But people have this obsession with being debt-free, and I personally think it's pretty stupid, if I'm honest, for somebody that wants to grow financially. If it's, I just want to work, get my job, pay down my mortgage, be debt-free, go on a holiday every year, cool, carry on with that, this probably isn't the video for you. If you're the average person, that kind of makes sense. I'm making the assumption that by being on this video and being on this channel, you're actually looking for growth financially anyway, okay? So, if that is you, let's break down the risks and maybe rewards of getting involved into this. First of all, the element of risk. You have to understand that any form of debt is you taking on a risk, and a mortgage is debt, by the way. So there is risk in this, and you need to be thinking, not only is there risk, because as soon as you get a mortgage, yes, you own the property, but the bank has a right to take over that property if certain criteria is not met. And it's easy enough to actually screw up some of that criteria. So you have to understand that by taking on some debt, if you were debt-free or mortgage-free, you've now assumed more risk from that for getting that money. You also have to factor in that although the interest is likely to be low, 2%, maybe 2.5%, there is now a payment on that money. And so every single day, not only is inflation attacking that money that you've loaned from it, you're also going to be paying an interest. Finally, there's a risk to where you put that money, because if you have it in your bank, obviously there's no point at all, that's going to be burning a hole in your pocket. But you also need to assess the risk of what you're putting it into. Say, for example, I get out 100,000 and I put 100,000 into a buy-to-let. That's a relatively safe investment vehicle, and I'd feel pretty confident. If, though, I was going to put it into cryptocurrency, an incredibly high-risk strategy that could make me loads of money or lose it all, I need to be willing to completely suffer that risk and suffer that loss if it all goes wrong. But just understand, with potential reward comes risk. The good news with this is some of the cheapest money you could ever get hold of. You know, if you think about why people lend money, it's to make a return on it. And the way that the banking system works is on something called the fractional reserve system. And fractional banking works that if they have 100,000 from the government or the central banks or Bank of England, they can lend out however much more. And it depends on a multiplier. At some points in time, it's been $1 million per 100,000. Now it's closer to $500,000. But the point is, they don't actually need the money to lend it out. It's all digital ones and zeros, right? Irrelevant for this video. When they're lending it out, they don't want to lose money. The first rule of lending money or investment in general is to not lose money. Rule number 2 is don't forget rule number 1, as Warren Buffett says. But when they're lending it out, they're looking at their risk. So, for example, if you've got a poor credit history and you've got no security, a car, a house, or anything to lend against, it's called a charge in property, that's very high risk. If you go to the opposite side of that spectrum, let's say you've never defaulted on a loan before, and they're able to put what is known as a first charge or a full charge on your personal residence where you live, that is a really safe, secure investment, because you're going to pay that. Otherwise you could be homeless, right? And so it makes them feel really secure. Because of that, they don't need to charge as much interest because they don't really need to take account of too much default rate on the property, meaning that you have got available some of the cheapest financing available in the UK today. Which brings me on to the reward portion of this video, and that is, what are you actually going to utilize the money for? People obsess, and I've had mentees come to me and say, hey, I've got $500,000 equity, I'm thinking of refinancing and pulling out 300,000. And it's kind of like okay, well, what are you actually going to use that for? Because that's a lot of money to suddenly utilize. Now, if you're in central London, that'll buy you a shed, right? But in other parts of the UK, that could buy you 7, 8, 9 properties using it as a deposit refurbishment, legals, etc., and utilizing leverage to grow your portfolio. So if you're going to take that risk, you need an increased proportionate reward to put it into. What I mean by this is, if I were to draw out, say, 300,000 and get a mortgage on my personal residence at 2.5%, 3%, I'd need to know that that money is going to go out there and work harder for me. So for example, for Aspire Property Group, which is my company that helps build portfolios for investors like you, we guarantee a minimum of 8% return on the investment. By the way, if you're interested in us building a portfolio, just put APG in the comments and one of my team will be in touch with that. But they know then, our investors, that if they can pull out that money at 3%, and we can get it working for them at a minimum of 8% return, they're making that 5% spread. But a key part of this is, if you're going to draw out in debt, make sure you've got something to actually go into. Don't draw out 300,000 and then go, cool, 300 grand, what do I do next? So the big question is, would I do it? In short, yes. I genuinely do not understand the obsession with paying off debt, especially when the debt is so bloody cheap in the first place. Now, caveat to this, this is in no way meant to be construed or misconstrued as financial advice. It's just my opinion on the matter. When you've got some of the cheapest finance available, why wouldn't I take advantage of that if I've got something I can put into it? But there's a couple of things to consider. Number one, am I happy assuming the risk of that, considering I was debt-free and there's nothing that could hinder me? I'd be perfectly happy with that. Number two, have I got cash available elsewhere? Because if I have, I would want to utilize that money first. And then finally, how much do I actually want to utilize? Because if I need 300,000, we'll use that as the example, and I've got something to put that into. Maybe it's hey, I've got 300,000, I want 50 grand per property for the deposit, etc. I'm going to buy 6 properties with that. Then yes, what I would do is refinance. And right now we're at historic low interest rates. So personally, I would refinance on a fixed percentage basis for as long as possible. Say there were a 5-10 year fixed, I'd probably refinance now on a 10-year fixed to pay that down and not have any fluctuations, and then purchase 6 properties with that. Or a really good tip for you, if you know you're going to be utilizing this, but you want to do it in the right way, what I would do is talk to my bank about a lifetime mortgage, or what's known as a drawdown mortgage, where the percentage will be slightly increased on what you are going to borrow, but you can actually draw down from that equity. So for example, they might say, hey, based on what it's at today, you can utilize up to 300,000, but this is going to be the interest rate. It might be an extra 0.7% more. Talk to your broker about that. I cannot give financial advice at all. But what you can do is, instead of paying X% on it automatically and you're rushing to find the investments, instead you can agree that drawdown, find the investment, and then draw down the amount you need in order to start building the portfolio. But hey, that's just my opinion. What I'd be interested in is, what would you do in this situation? If you are in this situation, what are you intending to do? Let me know in the comments. I'll try to reply to as many as possible. If you got value from this video, make sure to hit the like button. And hey, if you're new to property investment and new to the channel and you want to find out the right ways in order to scale your portfolio, then this is definitely the channel for you. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.